Part 1, Chapter 1 of Farewell Love, a Novel by Matilde Serao. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. 1. Motionless under the white coverlet of her bed, Anna appeared to have been sleeping soundly for the past 2 hours. Her sister Laura, who occupied a little cot at the other end of the big room, had that evening much prolonged her customary reading, which followed the last gossip of the day between the girls. But no sooner had she put out her candle than Anna opened her eyes and fixed them upon Laura's bed, which glimmered vaguely white in the distance. Anna was wide awake. She dared not move, she dared not even sigh, and all her life was in her gaze, trying to penetrate the secret of the dusk, trying to see whether really her sister was asleep. It was a winter night, and as the hour advanced, the room became colder and colder, but Anna did not feel it. The moment the light had been extinguished, a flame had leapt from her heart to her brain, diffusing itself through all her members, scalding her veins, scorching her flesh, quickening the beating of her pulses. As in the height of fever, she felt herself burning up. Her tongue was dry, her head was hot, and the icy air that entered her lungs could not quench the fire in her, could not subdue the tumultuous eruption of her young blood. Often, to relieve herself, she had longed to cry out, to moan, but the fear of waking Laura held her silent. It was not, however, so much from the great heat throbbing at her temples that she suffered, as from her inability to know for certain whether her sister was asleep. Sometimes she thought of moving noisily so that her bed should creak. Then, if Laura was awake, she would move in hers, and thus Anna could make sure. But the fear of thereby still further lengthening this time of waiting kept her from letting the thought become an action. She lay as motionless as if her limbs were bound down by 1,000 chains. She had lost all track of time, too. She had forgotten to count the last strokes of the clock that could be heard from the sitting room adjoining. It seemed to her that she had been lying like this for years, that she had been waiting for years, burning with this maddening fire for years, that she had spent years trying to pierce the darkness with her eyes. And then the horrible thought crossed her mind. What if the hour had passed? Perhaps it had passed without her noticing it. She who had waited for it so impatiently had let it escape. But no, presently, deadened by the distance and the doors closed between, she heard the clock ring out. The hour had come. Thereupon, with an infinite caution, born of infinite fear, slowly, trembling, holding her breath at every sound, pausing, starting back, going on, she sat up in bed and at last slipped out of it. That vague spot of whiteness in the distance, where her sister lay, still fascinated her. She kept her head turned in its direction, while with her hands she felt for her shoes and stockings and clothes. They were all there, placed conveniently near, but every little difficulty she had to overcome in dressing, so as not to make the slightest noise, represented a world of precautions, of pauses, and of paralyzing fears. When at last she had got on her frock of white serge, which shone out in the darkness, "Perhaps Laura sees me," she thought. But she had made ready a big heavy black shawl, and in this she now wrapped herself from head to foot, and the whiteness of her frock was hidden. Then, having accomplished the miracle of dressing herself, she stood still at her bedside. She had not dared to take a step as yet, sure that by doing so she would wake Laura. "A little strength, heaven send me a little strength," she prayed inwardly. Then she set forth stealthily across the room. In the middle of it, seized by a sudden audacious impulse, she called out her sister's name in a whisper. "Laura, Laura," listening intensely. No answer. She went on, past the door, through the sitting room, the drawing room, feeling her way amidst the chairs and tables. She struck her shoulder against the frame of the door between the sitting room and the drawing room and halted for a moment with a beating heart. Madonna mia, Madonna mia, she murmured in an agony of terror. Then she had to pass before the room of her governess, Stella Martini, but the poor good lady was a sound sleeper, and Anna knew it. When she reached the dining room, it seemed to her that she must have traversed 100 separate chambers, 100 entire apartments, an endless chain of chambers and apartments. At last, she opened the door that gave upon the terrace and ran out into the night, the cold, the blackness. She crossed the terrace to the low dividing wall between it and the next. "Giustino! Giustino!" she called. Suddenly, the shadow of a man appeared on the other terrace, very near, very close to the wall of division. A voice answered, "Here I am, Anna." But she, taking his hand, drew him towards her, saying, "Come, come." He leapt over the little wall. Covered by her black mantle, without speaking, Anna bent her head and broke into sobs. "What is it? What is wrong?" he asked, trying to see her face. Anna wept without answering. "Don't cry, don't cry. Tell me what's troubling you," he murmured earnestly, with a caress in his words and in his voice. "Nothing, nothing. I was so frightened," she stammered. "Dearest, dearest, dearest," he whispered. "Oh, I am a poor creature, a poor thing," she said with a desolate gesture. "I love you so," said Giustino simply in a low voice. "Oh, say that again," she begged, ceasing to weep. "I love you so, Anna. I adore you, my soul, my darling. If you love me, you must be calm. I adore you, my dearest one. Promise me that you won't cry any more then. I adore you, I adore you, I adore you," she repeated, her voice heavy with emotion. He did not speak. It seemed as if he could find no words fit for responding to such a passion. A gust of wind swept over them. "Are you cold?" he asked. "No, feel." And she gave him her hand. Her little hand, between those of Giustino, was indeed not cold. It was burning. "That is love," said she. He lifted the hand gently to his lips and kissed it lightly, and thereupon her eyes glowed in the darkness, like human stars of passion. "My love is consuming me," she went on, as if speaking to herself. "I can feel nothing else, neither cold, nor night, nor danger, nothing. I can only feel you. I want nothing but your love. I only want to live near you always, till death and after death, always with you, always, always." "Ah me," sighed he under his breath. "What did you say?" she cried eagerly. "It was a sigh, dear one, a sigh over our dream." "Don't talk like that! Don't say that!" she exclaimed. "Why shouldn't I say it, Anna? The sweet dream that we have been dreaming together, any day we may have to wake from it. They aren't willing that we should live together." "Who they?" "He who can dispose of you as he wishes, Cesare Diaz." "Have you seen him?" "Yes, today." "And he won't consent?" "He won't consent." "Why not?" "Because you have money and I have none. Because you are noble and I'm not." "But I adore you, Giustino." "That matters little to your guardian." "He's a bad man." "He's a man," said Giustino shortly. "But it's an act of cruelty that he's committing," she cried, lifting her hands towards heaven. Giustino did not speak. "What did you answer? What did you plead? Didn't you tell him again that you love me, that I adore you, that I shall die if we are separated? Didn't you describe our despair to him?" It was useless. replied Justino sadly. Oh dear, you didn't tell him of our love, of our happiness? You didn't implore him, weeping? You didn't try to move his hard old heart? But what sort of man are you? What sort of soul have you, that you let them sentence us to death like this? Oh Lord, what man have I been loving? Anna, he said softly. Why didn't you defy him? Why didn't you rebel? You're young, you're brave. How would Cesare Diaz, almost an old man with ice in his veins, how could he frighten you? Because Cesare Diaz was right, Anna, he answered quietly. Oh, horror, horrible sacrilege of love, cried Anna, starting